someone who might know is former Met Police detective Peter Bleksley, one of my favourite people on this here planet. How are you doing, Peter?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good. Now, let's just talk some common sense. What is going on? I mean, you kind of feel if you go to the police and say, you know, something dastardly happens, some character has come in from a back window and burgled my telly, that they would take some fingerprints, look at the records, and especially when people now have various cameras and things and security lights on all their houses, be able to snatch someone up and throw them into the court system and hopefully get them banged up.
The really depressing thing that comes out from these statistics, and it's loud and clear, is that crime does pay. So many people are committing crime and, quite frankly, just getting away with it. But there's an argument one could say that actually this might be quite a good thing because the prisons are full. If the police miraculously, and bearing in mind this week they gave a pledge to start investigating all manner of crimes, theft of bikes, theft of phones, domestic burglaries and the like, they are going to investigate those crimes now. If they do and they start catching people, where are they going to put all these criminals when they've been to court and they've been sentenced? The prisons are so full that some police stations are housing prisoners that should be in a jail. So the criminal justice system as a whole is really not fit for purpose. It's creaking at the seams. Well, actually, you could quite easily say it's broken.
Well, it is indeed. I mean, the Bibby Stockholm's still empty. We could think about using that, or maybe deport some of the foreign nationals who clog up our prisons. That could be a good start as well. I just want to go through some of the statistics here because, I mean, they are eye-watering. They're quite upsetting. So 6,000 criminals a day are getting away with it. 2.25 million cases were dropped last year because the police failed to find a suspect. That involves more than 30,000 sex offences, 330,000 violent crimes, 1.5 million thefts and 320,000 cases of criminal damage and arson. But the bit, I mean, I find that just utterly appalling. But the bit that sort of bothers me the most is where it says crimes where no suspect was identified represented 40% of all cases. Well, OK, if 40% of these crimes aren't being solved is because you can't find out who the perpetrator was, I kind of get that. If you haven't got the evidence or there's been no video recording, especially in more complex crimes, I can see why you can't then charge someone. But what's going on with the other 60% where the people are identified? Why are they not being prosecuted?
If there was a 60% success rate in terms of investigating crime, and we were discussing how only 40% of crime went unsolved, that would be quite satisfactory. Not perfect, but most definitely satisfactory. But we have a policing in the UK these days, which quite frankly, in many regards, is scared of its own shadow. Only the other day, I was talking to a very public-spirited man who does a lot of brilliant work in Cambridge with the use of a social media platform to retrieve stolen bikes. Now, Cambridge is a city famed for its cycling. There are thousands of cyclists there, and lots of them have their bikes stolen. And to them, it's a very serious crime. Some of these bikes, astonishingly, could be worth £3,000 or £4,000. And one such bike that was fitted with a tracker was followed by the victim using technology to see where this bike went. And it was established that it was hidden on a traveller's site. So you would think, bit of old school policing, muster a few officers together, get a warrant if need be, go in there, retrieve the bike, and if there's evidence, nick someone. Oh, no, no, no. The police had to do, guess what? A risk assessment. And of course, that meant they were too scared to go in there. Finally, some days later, they did, by which time the bike had been angle grinded into tiny pieces and was just scrap metal.
I've never understood this. There was that big story out the other week, wasn't there, of David T.C. Davis, not the sort of big Brexty David Davis that people know, the white-haired old fella, but the one in Monmouthshire, who had basically put a leaflet through doors of local residents saying, do you want a traveller's site on your doorstep? Because the local council were basically just signing off on a traveller's site, and he thought that people should have a say. And he was absolutely pilloried for essentially being prejudiced against some sort of sacred community. And that makes me think, Peter, that all too often now, it seems in the sort of daily effort of policing, there are so many protected characteristics and groups that, you know, no wonder police are having such a hard time. They're being sent out to investigate hate crimes on Twitter because someone said a mean word about gender identity, or they're not able to stop and search people who might be the most likely characters carrying, you know, very dangerous and offensive weapons. We've just had Notting Hill Carnival, record number of arrests, and yet Sadiq Khan's there saying anybody who says perhaps his carnival should at the very least be ticketed and moved to Hyde Park is clearly a racist. Do you think that political correctness is, you know, having some bearing on the fact that policing is falling apart?
Undoubtedly, this liberal, fluffy wokery that now pollutes so much of policing is having a serious impact on the effectiveness of the police. And of course, when the police are ineffective, it is us, the public, that suffer. There are some green shoots of hope, I think, because a couple of chief constables have been quite forthright in what they've said, and the chief constable in Manchester got his officers to investigate every burglary, and lo and behold, guess what happened? Suddenly, they started detecting, finding and locking up burglars. You can't solve a crime that you don't investigate. We must only hope that there is some kind of pushback against this level of senior management that pollutes policing, that wants to be so correct, so hip, and so yay and down with the kids. Because, quite frankly, it is nonsense. The public want effective policing. And what does that mean? That officers patrol the streets and keep them safe. When crime happens, that it is investigated promptly and professionally. And thirdly, that bad people get locked up.
I mean, policing, like everything else that seems to be broken in Britain at the moment, it's become the latest political football. I mean, it's worth pointing out that these stats that were garnered from the Home Office were garnered by the Labour Party, who wanted to get their mitts on the figure so they could make a point. And, well, they have every right to as the party in opposition. And what they're saying is it's all down to the Conservatives, of course. I haven't heard the word austerity for a while, but, of course, it's, you know, all the cuts to being able to give the police the resources they need and bobbies on the beat. And they've pledged to give 13,000 more neighbourhood police officers and put PCSOs back on Britain's streets, as well as 7,000 detectives via new recruitment schemes. Is that what's needed, Peter? Is that going to do the job?
Yeah, numbers do matter in policing, as we saw, because if we cast our minds back, the then Prime Minister Boris Johnson realised that part of what was so dreadfully wrong with policing was simply they didn't have enough numbers. And so, of course, there was that uptake of 20,000 officers. But it goes beyond that, because during the age of austerity, a lot of backroom jobs were lost. A lot of civilian roles were simply vanished overnight, or civilian staff vanished overnight. And now many of those jobs are being filled by, guess who? Yes, police officers. Police officers that should be out on the streets. But there's a reluctance from many police officers to get out on the streets because of the paperwork, because of the scrutiny, because of the fear that their management will not support them. We need the police to grow a spine once again, be disciplined, be there for one another if people are acting lawfully and are committed public servants, and start giving the public a proper police service.
Oh, Peter, and if only you could be in charge of it. That would be my wish. When I say my prayers tonight, that's going to be top of the list. Peter, before you go, tell me about Crime Suspect, which is on TalkTV's YouTube channel.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's a new show. We've got 4 episodes that we've done so far. The 4th episode dropped last night, and that's all about Lucy Letby. And it's a piece of broadcasting that I'm extremely proud of. We had a very talented panel who gave brilliant contributions, had a wonderful discussion. So I urge anybody, please, to go onto YouTube and search for our show called Crime Suspect. You might find it easier to actually search my name and find the show. And I'm sure you'll find some very entertaining, enlightening, insightful viewing there. It's a show I'm very proud of.
I couldn't think of a better way to tuck myself in at night than be joined by Peter Bleksley's mellifluous tones and common sense.